Marius Mrosek from Viessmann. I met Marius a couple of years ago already. He worked very closely, and I think still does, with Max Viessmann. He played a really important role in the digital transformation and in the larger transformation of Viessmann as a big company, as one of the largest, most successful, most innovative German Mittelstand companies. And I'm really happy to have you here today, Marius. Really happy to hear from your experiences. And yeah, the stage is yours for today's keynote. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Johannes, for the introduction. Let me quickly share my screen. All right, I'm obviously today coming also in a different agenda. My current playground is part of Maschinenraum. This is an initiative made lately by Viessmann. But obviously, I'm bringing with myself a case, or let's say an OKR related story from Viessmann. And I think, Johannes, you mentioned a lot of words of transparency, and I'm happy I choose this topic as one very important one, which also had a crucial role, or played a crucial role, in the transformation, and especially the cultural change at Viessmann. I totally agree with you. Companies have to be more resilient in their operations, but they especially also have to be, and now we can say resiliently be innovative, and strengthen kind of the force of innovation they have. And luckily now, after, as you said, I joined Viessmann 4.5 years ago. Luckily, 4 years later, we can see already some, in German you would say Früchte, we see some success in terms of our culture moving quickly towards a more innovative one, and sustainably innovative one, where you don't have to fight every day on transparency as one fundament within. So very quickly, okay. Maschinenraum, latest initiative of Viessmann, and that's, I promise, that's also the last slide, of many Mittelstands companies. But as we're talking about transparency and openness also includes obviously cooperation. And Maschinenraum is one latest initiative in which I'm a director, of nowadays 14 Mittelstands companies, rather the bigger size ones. But we all exchange on certain topics, and OKRs is one topic of it. On the one hand, we have a loosely coupled ecosystem where these companies first of all get in touch with each other. We structured exchanges, and we also structure exchanges and curate exchanges towards agility, strategy execution, and OKRs obviously as well. And that's why I'm also happy to work closely together with Workpath on this topic at least. And we also help these companies to deeply connect and also start to innovate together. In Neudeutsch, I wanted to actually say, but nowadays you say do co-creation together. But as promised, not too much about that certain initiative, which is part of the Viessmann strategy and should also be part of many other or all other companies to open up to and to exchange with other enterprises. Viessmann did do a significant step in the last 4 years on the transition from Professor Martin Viessmann, who is Max's father, obviously Max Viessmann, who in his generation very much pushed diversification and internationalization on a business level. Also put the company on a very vital and obviously performing level with the structure of a 100-year-old company. And at that certain day back in 2017, he handed over to his son, Max Viessmann, who clearly understood that in order to keep that company vital and growing, it requires more than just a good plan, but it actually requires something which unites the whole company on a certain plan, and a plan which you might not be able anymore to define as long-termish and clear as you did in the last years, and as it was possible with the markets that companies saw in the last years. So coming with obviously very much more dynamic markets and changing legislative regulations, there had to be a uniting factor. And besides doing this transparently, Max did a great job finding a common purpose for his company, and a strategy and vision for each department, which definitively not anymore focused on and if you don't know the core business of Viessmann, the core business of Viessmann is actually providing heat with boilers in the basement of buildings. The actual purpose is to remain on a planet which is worth living, and the part Viessmann can provide there is obviously the one which is the living space. And living space you can once see on a very specific level on the room, but you can also look at a city or even a planet Earth as the living space we can shape, and Viessmann is actively shaping. So creating living spaces for generations to come, at least a great purpose, which if you ask, I would say one of the 12,000 employees of Viessmann, all of them will know that and really commit themselves towards. But it's even more important to make clear what does that actually mean for my organization. And I brought that picture with me, obviously behind the bubbles. There are concrete visualizations of a potential future portfolio. So on the one side, making transparent what we're working on, and on that level, that's upfront. We didn't talk about OKRs, but rather strategic directives, which were structured in exactly the way OKRs are structured, but we didn't frame it and brand it in that way back in the days, and we're still not doing today. But it was about creating and making it clear, creating a clear roadmap on what we want to achieve, and especially how we can achieve that, and making that transparent. And if we're talking about transparency, obviously we all know, and I hope that's not the discussion we will have today. Transparency is part of the framework of OKRs and should be part of every strategy execution. But I'm not sure if every company nowadays is driving that as streamlined as Viessmann is doing. And We Succeed is actually a program itself, which Viessmann launched to den Wandel gestalten, to manage the succession of the new generations. And the fun part is they're not looking into the generation change from Martin to Max, but they're actually looking into how can we provide or how can Viessmann put themselves in the best position to do another succession to the next generation. And obviously that's a lot about resilience, but it's even more. And you see here, not Workpath as a tool, but at least the intranet of Viessmann, where I think at least it makes clear what transparency means for Viessmann. It means that everyone, really every one of the 13,000 employees can access in detail what the strategy is of the overall company, of the group, but especially of their department, as they also have different pillars and businesses. So customer centricity and leadership models obviously are part of this, but alignment, cross-functionality, and transparency is important. And it's a basis, obviously, also to make strategy work. And this is also what Martin Viessmann, so Max's father, always put into focus. So strategies are pointing out the way, but they're not going the way for you. And at the same day when Martin handed over the let's say the CEO title or the co-CEO title to Max Viessmann, we also talked about objectives and key results. And as you can read, obviously, it's about implementing our vision at full transparency. And maybe at this point, this might be Viessmann specific, but we did it very explicitly on the one hand, but also implicitly, which means explicitly by providing, we didn't implement it, we rather provided our employees the option, the possibility to use OKRs with a standardized framework, and also, yes, a central place where they could ask questions, but that central place, they were not in charge of pushing it into the organization, but they were rather about their making it transparent what OKRs can serve for, and we were nearly hoping that leaders would adapt to the principles or the framework of OKRs. And as I mentioned before, we also did it very implicitly. We just structured our goal setting in an OKR setting, but we didn't necessarily named it OKR. So our whole strategy, which you saw in a document, the slide before, was structured in the way OKRs work. And at Maschinenraum and with many other members, we again and again come to the conclusion that change has to be driven top down. But it doesn't mean to push change or new structures into the organization with force, but it means you have to obviously be a role model, and that's also the way how we obviously structured our strategies, and people then automatically started to adapt OKRs. I was the one introducing it back in 2017 to the company, and catching up on the topic, as I was rather on a project based on that topic, catching up with some departments I spoke with in 2017, now in the beginning of 2020, I found out that they're still using the same frameworks or templates we created back in the days. And I actually didn't expect them to still be using OKRs. What that means, and Workpath is definitively our partner of choice. And as Johannes said, we are talking since the very beginning of the transformation story. I think it's not necessarily, and that's what I like also with working with Workpath, it's about the mindset, and that's why I was also happy to read that word in the title of that quarterly summit, because it's definitively a mindset which is more important than a tool, although obviously transparency, and if we're now looking into remote work, is even more important, and it's probably best achieved with a digital tool. So when I would have been speaking 5 months ago about OKRs, I would also propose teams to just put it on the wall as long as OKRs are transparent. But looking into the way of work, what we're doing today, and I really hope, Johannes, that that's also pushing your business, is that a digital tool obviously nowadays is important and necessary. And we started with spreadsheets, we used Asana, we looked into Workpath. In the end, we still remained at Asana, which is not a dedicated tool, but the most important part is that companies understand that transparency has to lie behind it. And if you type at Viessmann leadership OKRs in the Asana search field, then you will find the OKRs of the very, very top management. And also coming to the results, looking into Corona, and that's ultimately the goal is to enable the individual in the company to actually submit ideas in a very placative way, plakative Aussprache. But it's about so that's actually the mindset we also created with the transparency, but also with the tools and OKR framework which we provided, that people really understand that they are heard. And we create is another campaign where we actually source ideas, so crowdsourcing ideas from the bigger Viessmann family, and we have campaigns there. And one campaign is actually what can we positively take out of that crisis, and also what things can we stop. It's not necessarily only about cost cutting, but also about strategic topics. And we see that nearly everyone is actually let's say bringing ideas which pay into the strategy. And if we wouldn't be as transparent on strategy, and on the purpose, obviously the ideas would be much more diverse and maybe crazy. Although being crazy is important, and I think when I'm talking about successes, and I was just when I now have to look behind my laptop, one part is that Viessmann started to produce ventilation systems for hospitals. They, I think, within 2 days started to produce disinfection material and started distributing across all sites. And that more complex products like that ventilation were like brought to product in 2 weeks. From idea to product in 2 weeks. For a complex product, obviously they had the luck that many parts are equal. But as Manager Magazine was putting, it's a very clever strategy. I would probably put it rather, it's a very clever culture, and it's a very clever mindset where people start collaborating, and they don't fear to approach directly our CTO to, and in this case, it was a data scientist from a department who said, "Dear Markus Klausener, could we not use our systems in a different way to, in this crisis, provide also the option to produce ventilation systems for hospitals?" And maybe that's also the message I wanted to convey in that very, very short keynote. You can never over communicate on your strategy. And I also put the context here because at the very beginning, we obviously also talked very much about what is actually influencing us, which changes happen, and why should we actually reconsider revisit our purpose, our culture, and our strategy. So really looking outside and then coming back to the actual strategy and organization, which has to adapt. Make routines and rhythm transparent. We have at Viessmann the so-called heartbeat. We have standardized frameworks in terms of objectives and key results, but as I mentioned, we don't push it into the organization, but we rather try to convince people that this is an actual value add, not just for managers, but for all employees, having transparency on the goals of different departments. So if the Workers' Council, and sometimes you're speaking to, that just happened last week when I also had contact with you guys from Workpath. If at some companies a Worker Council is saying we don't want to have transparency between departments, then obviously OKRs and the whole framework behind it might get problem with implementation. So at that point, maybe I would thank you very much for also the option to be here, and really, really encourage everyone to, yes, push OKRs, but especially push and ask for the right culture behind it. And the culture really can or should also start top down from the very management and the owner of a company. So yeah, thank you very much from my side. If there are any questions or connection points, please feel free to reach out to me afterwards, and hope I didn't took too long for that. Handing over back to the Workpath team.
Perfect, thank you so much. I think there was one question from